21st of February, Briar Road. Whatever do you think will happen now? Good question. What a strange situation for Mr. Natsume, arrested for murder, but then the victim comes back to life. I think perhaps the victim was never dead in the first place. It seems very likely that Mr. Chancer did consume poison as we deduced. But it was an accident, attempted suicide, or attempted murder? Until the truth can be established, I imagine the police will keep Mr. Natsume in custody. I suppose so. Let's hope it doesn't come to anything more than a night in the cells. Oh, what's this? What's that man doing over there? It looks like he's trying to see what into Sosuke-san's lodgings. Is something wrong, Miss Naruhodo? Excuse me. Could we have a word? Ah. He just ran off. I feel sure that I've seen that man somewhere before. Where was it? I do too, but I don't remember. He does look familiar. With the exception of the top floor, where Mr. and Mrs. Garrett live, all the windows are bricked up. Yes, and that's because of the old window tax that was charged on a number of windows a property had. In order to pay less tax, the poorer members of society filled in many of their windows. But the tax has since been abolished, hasn't it? So the windows could all be opened up again, surely. Unfortunately, it would appear that the residents of this district can't afford to pay to have the work done. Yes, that is a sad state of affairs. Especially for the people like poor Mr. Natsume, who have lived all cooped up in a windowless room. I suppose that's the price you pay for living in a very cheap accommodation. It all seems rather pointless when you put it like that. There always seems to be a bicycle outside the Garrett residence. I read that bicycles are extremely popular all over Great Britain at the moment, in fact. That one seems very warped, though, especially the front wheel. Is that to make it more of a challenge to ride, you think? No, I'm afraid that may be a result of the rider's incompetence. For the front wheel to be so badly warped, I'm afraid the rider may have been similarly afflicted. Then there's a good chance Mr. Natsume has been practicing on this bicycle, I think. Oh dear, I fear you may be right. Yes, the poor bicycle. I don't know if we need to, like, keep looking around here, but maybe we should go inside somewhere. Options. Oh. The Garrett household and Mr. Natsume's lodgings are in a prominent position here on the corner. There on the corner. Sometimes when I look at the building, I can't help but feeling that it's a bit of a slant. It does look as though it would collapse in even the small earthquake, doesn't it? It's weird seeing Suzette like this. I do kind of miss her dashing disguise, but she's so cute like this, I guess. That's so funny. This is her normal. This is her. Not her alter ego. And isn't it supposed to be haunted as well? I think I might have a hunch as to why Sosuke-san has such a hunchback. Oh, I guess I can exit so I can move. A new location has been added. Okay, so I don't know if we really need to linger around Briar Road necessarily. But yeah, we want to visit the Garredebs and the prison. The prison cell where the defendant, Mr. Sosuke Natsume, is being held. He's spending so much time in it, he'll have to start calling the place home soon. Oh dear me. It seems they must still be questioning poor Mr. Natsume. 21st February, local prison, cell 9. Oh, they're still questioning him. Okay, we can't talk to him yet. Let's go to the Garredebs then. The suite on top of the floor of the house where Mr. Natsume has his lodging, occupied by the landlord, Mr. Garredeb and his wife. The window looks out over Briar Road below. Don't you know, I don't believe we've visited this place for some time. Let's go. 21st February, the Garredeb's room. Here we are again. The eccentric landlord's eccentric top floor abode. We're here because Mr. Garredeb's the one who discovered the incident this morning. Don't forget.
Ah, you chaps, eh?
Yes, good morning, sir.
Thank you for your cooperation in court yesterday.
It was quite a trial. As much for Mr. Garrett as anyone, really.
Came straight back here after all that business at the Bailey yesterday. Didn't expect to wake up to more bally nonsense this morning.
I wonder, if you wouldn't mind telling us exactly what happened, Mr. Garrett.
Yes, I suppose you'd like to know all about that dead loss of an actor chap in the ground floor room.
Those are exactly Inspector Gregson's words, weren't they? This morning's incident. It must have been a real shock for you this morning. I heard that you discovered what had happened.
Ah, well, that hopeless actor chap rises at 5 o'clock sharp every morning without fail. But at 5:30 this morning, he still hadn't lit the gas. So I went down and knocked on his door, but no belly answer.
That's when you broke into his room by kicking down the door?
Well, I called on that rum-looking Japanese chap to do the grunt work, of course.
Wasn't it a little premature to kick the door down? The man could have just overslept by half an hour. That's very true, Mr. Naruhodo. If 30 minutes oversleeping warranted such behavior, I'd have to kick your door down every morning.
Well, you know, better to be safe than sorry and all that.
Is it just me, or is he avoiding our gaze now all of a sudden? Except that it was a sorry situation indeed that you found on the far side of the door. Mr. Shamspeare. The victim's name is Mr. Shamspeare, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, William Shamspeare. Took the ground floor room 3 months ago now.
And how would you describe him?
In a word, destitute.
Destitute?
Well, let's face it, only the redeeming feature of that room is the cheap rent. Anyone wanting to live in a place like that to see the broker has a bally screw loose.
So hard to choose which category Sosuke-san would fall into. Mr. Naruhodo, that's a little rude.
He was doing research as well.
Research? Into what?
Shakespeare, of course. Shakespeare. Read a few plays of the old bard myself, you know. Romeo and Hamlet and all that.
Yes, William Shakespeare is England's most highly regarded classical playwright and author. He's known as Sao in Japanese, as you know, and many of his works have already been translated. It seems incredible that Shakespeare was shortened to Sao, though. Someone was too heavy-handed there. There were a lot of costumes in the victim's room, actually, weren't there? Of course, Mr. Natsume is a scholar of English literature as well. I imagine he and Mr. Shamspeare would have much in common. Shakespeare interpretation disagreement leads to shocking murder. Let's not hope it's that. Mr. Naruhodo, really, how rude. Yesterday's events. After Mr. Natsume's trial yesterday, you came straight back here, I believe, didn't you? Did you notice anything strange between then and this morning?
Well, now, must have been about 6 in the evening by the time I got home. Snow was coming down rather heavily, as I remember, and it was completely dark already. That failed actor chap was out at the time.
Mr. Garrett had noticed that there was no light from his room or something, I suppose.
Couldn't summon the energy for anything much, so I just sat in front of the fire up here. It was after 8 before Shamspeare got back, and the chap was up until past 1 in the morning, I'll have you know. Suppose he met his end sometime after that. I was asleep by then, so I'm rather in the dark here.
Well, thank you. That was very illuminating. Is everything alright, Miss Susato? Well, I was just thinking it's a little strange, that's all. Mr. Garrett, you're up here in your room all evening, if I've understood correctly?
Not a big fan of stairs, not with this blasted leg.
Then, how is it that you seem to know? The precise movements of your tenant on the ground floor, I mean. That's a very good point. I can't imagine that you could hear noises from the ground floor all the way up here. Does this old man like to spy on his tenants? Is that it?
I say, I know what you're thinking, and it's bally outrage. I'm ex-military, don't you know? Don't go around spying on my tenants. Why would I?
And how did you know, Mr. Garrett?
It's the gas, woman. The gas tells me everything.
The gas? Speaking gas. What on earth do you mean, sir? How can the gas tell you anything, let alone everything?
Well, as you're probably aware, the gas is supplied to the building by the pipes.
Yes, I more or less worked that out. Every room in the building is connected by a single pipe to the gas main outside, and the gas company supplies gas to the properties via the main. Yes, I understand that too.
Let me see if I can explain. Let's say I was to light the gas lamps up here. What do you suppose would happen?
Well, obviously the room would get brighter.
Exactly, but at the same time, the lights in all the other rooms of the house would dim for a moment.
What? They dim? Why? Perhaps it's because when you light a gas lamp, it briefly uses more gas than usual, and that reduces the amount of gas in the pipe for the other lamps that are connected to it? That might explain why the other lamps dim momentarily, mightn't it? Yes, of course, because everything's connected to a single supply pipe. Is that supposed to happen, though? It sounds rather undesirable.
Jolly good point. Fact is, the gas company's pipes in these parts are pretty hopeless, long worn out. You barely got any gas in them to start with. Opposite's also true, of course. Extinguish the lamps up here, and they glow brighter in the rest of the house.
Ah, right. I see. So by watching the flickering of the lamps in one room, you can determine what's happening elsewhere.
You've got it.
Oh, of course, because when people come back home in the evening, before they go to sleep at night, what they're guaranteed to do is either light or put out their lamps and fires. Clever.
In point of fact, the room on the ground floor and the one above it use slightly different amounts of gas. By watching the lights in here closely, I can work out almost exactly what's going on in the whole house.
Gosh, that's fascinating, Mr. Gerdeb. Absolutely fascinating.
Oh, well, nothing to it, really.
I can't really see that it's going to help us with the case either. What I'd like to know is why Mr. Gerdeb is so interested in what his tenants are up to in the first place. I feel like there's more to it than idle curiosity. Well, we've done as much investigating here as we can, I think. Perhaps we ought to go to the prison to speak with Mr. Natsume again. A good idea. Alright. Let's do that then. 21st February, local prison cell 9. Look, Mr. Naruhodo. Mr. Natsume. Have the police finished questioning you now?
Lord, Mr. Naruhodo, Esquire.
Oh, yes?
What is he? Tell me! Is he a ghost? Is he here to haunt me?
Let me guess. You're talking about Mr. Sholmes? He actually calls himself a great detective, Mr. Natsume. Not a ghost.
But his diabolic deductions, they're not of this world. They've left me. Oh, cursed. I'm cursed, I tell you.
Well, that sort of hurts. Credit where credit is due, Mr. Naruhodo. You're heavily involved in the deduction, too. Yes, moving on. We have some wonderful news.
Oh?
The victim that we all thought was dead has come back to life again. Now, in the absolutely worst case, you can only be tried for attempted murder. That's great, isn't it, Mr. Natsume?
It's terrible.
Oh.
I'm stuck in this cell, suffering for some silly wrong end of the stick. You did it, did you? Confess. You're a killer. Why the mustache? Constant questions.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Are you a selfish shyster? Make up your mind. Are you dead or alive? If you were going to come back alive, why bother dying? Wiggly, wishy-washy, William.
Well, it seems likely that Mr. Shamster was never actually dead in the first place.
Ah, yes, that might make sense.
And I'm pleased that he's alive, of course.
Our lively debate last night was much fun. I'd be sad to think it was our last.
Oh.
Oops.
Mr. Natsume? Does this mean that you did see the victim last night? You met with Mr. Shamspear, didn't you?
I'm not saying another word. I demand to have a lawyer present.
Who do you think I am? Please, Mr. Natsume, we need to hear your side of the story. I like the mustache.
Ugh, why am I cursed like this?
What happened? Can you tell us exactly what happened last night then, Mr. Natsume?
There's nothing to tell. But, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire, I'm eternally grateful to you for helping me with that accursed case yesterday.
The case that saw Miss Porgreen hospitalized after she ended up with a knife in her back. It's hard to believe that was only yesterday.
After the trial was over, I trekked my weary way back to my lowly lodgings. And that evening, at 9:30 it must have been, I visited Mr. Shakespeare.
So, you did go to the victim's room then? As we feared.
I didn't do anything wrong! I'd never been to his room before. It was the first time.
Then, what made you decide to go?
I bumped into him when we arrived back at the house. We got chatting and it developed into a discussion. He had to go out, so I bade him farewell.
That ties in with what Mr. Gerardip said, that the victim went out and came back after 8.
We met again later that evening, at around 9 or just after.
When I took him some nice tea I'd brewed as a gift. So it was you who brought the tea that had clearly been drunk at the scene then. And I suppose you were discussing the works of Shakespeare, were you?
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. Romeo and Juliet. Who was the stronger? It was a delightful debate.
I'm sure.
Such a stimulating subject, Shakespeare.
And the debate became very heated, so you slipped poison into Mr. Shakespeare's tea?
No, never, not at all. Team Juliet won. That was me. And when I left his room, the flamboyant fellow was fighting fit. I swear it, categorically.
Mr. Natsume, you often say the same thing about yourself, I've noticed. That you have a cursed existence.
I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before, but I've been here in Great Britain for a year now, and in that time, I've learned that it's no place for me.
It can be very trying to live in a foreign land and adapt to the ways of another culture.
There are foreigners everywhere I look, and they all stare at me. They all laugh. That's the impression I get whenever I go out. It makes me scared to leave my room. Which is why I've become a recluse. But even in my room, I find no respite from my fears. I've moved more times than I can remember. And then, 1 week ago, I moved into Briar Road.
But why? I mean, why did you choose that place? It doesn't seem very comfortable.
Because the rent is cheap. I have so little money, it spoke to me.
The rent?
Obviously, there's a reason why it's cheap. Because the room is cursed.
Cursed? Cursed how?
The previous occupant, the man who lived there before, I took the room, died there.
Oh no!
He was only a young man, but one morning he was found dead and no one could explain why.
Surely no one wanted to live in a room with a history like that.
I didn't. When the letting agent recommended the place, I wavered. But I want books, and books cost money. A horrible history is a small price to pay. When I realized it would mean I could buy more books, I signed the lease like lightning.
Brave? Or blinkered?
But after I moved in, I soon came to realize what I'd done. I realized how horrible that room's history really was.
Gosh, was it really so awful? Horrible history. How did the room's horrible history affect you, Mr. Natsume? What happened?
At first, it was just a feeling. The feeling of beady eyes boring into my back, watching me.
Do you think that might have just been your mind playing tricks on you?
No. My mind doesn't know any tricks. It was someone else. It's been one long nightmare ever since I was given keys to the place.
A nightmare? You've been having bad dreams, you mean?
All the souls who died in that room lean over me in my sleep and try to strangle me.
That really is horrible.
And now I've come to think of it, it happened again last night too. The very same night that Mr. Shakespeare was writhing in agony from the poison in his body. I was on the verge of being suffocated silently by those miserable spirits in my room.
You simply must move out of that room as soon as possible.
Yes, you're right. I know it. And that's why I'm already searching for the next room with a history to call home.
I think perhaps you should try to avoid accommodation with any kind of history at all. Otherwise, I'm scared that you may self become history.
Susato-san knows how to make the man listen. Of course, Mr. Lord of the Manor is worried about the curse on my room as well.
You mean Mr. Gerda?
Yes, he knows that if people keep dying there, he'll never be able to rent it out again.
Well, that's true. I, for one, wouldn't want to go near the place. Perhaps that may explain why the landlord pays so much attention to the gas lamps and his tenants' movements.
You mean because he's worried about their well-being?
He does seem to have an unusually keen interest in the amount of gas in the pipes. There must be a reason why he keeps such close tabs on the occupants of his let rooms.
What do you mean he pays so much attention to the gas lamps?
Oh dear, no! It's nothing to do with you, Mr. Natsume. Please, forget I said anything.
Oh, now you're talking about me behind my back as well.
What's important is that Mr. Shakespeare isn't in fact dead at all. Once he's come around and he'll be able to tell us what happened, we'll be able to get you released.
Yes, please. Oh, I do hope you're right. Excuse me.
Inspector Gregson!
I couldn't help but overhear what you just said. And on that note, I have some good news and some bad news.
Oh.
Which do you want first? Always, every time, the bad news comes first. What hope is all you have, hold on to it. That's my guiding principle. Right, well, in that case, the good news it is. Huh? Sorry, but it's just a lot easier to explain everything that way. Then why did you ask me my preference? As you might have heard, the victim, Mr. Shakespeare, was just unconscious. He's come round now.
Yes, we saw it happen, in all its terrifying glory.
He's still being treated by the doctors, but we managed to get a written statement from him already.
Oh, isn't that wonderful, Mr. Natsume?
Oh, thank goodness. It's all over then. I can leave this somber cell. Sorry, no. That's not on the cards. What?
Why ever not, Inspector?
Mr. Shakespeare has implicated someone as being responsible for what happened last night.
Implicated someone? Oh dear.
You don't mean... I'm sorry to say that I do, yes. He's pointed the finger at you, Mr. Natsume. By sweet poison did he seeketh to end my life. That wickest, caitiff, Sosuke Natsume.
No.
So I'm afraid you'll be appearing in court as planned. You will want to make the necessary preparations. No!
And so, once again, Sosuke's son found himself having to take the dock in the Old Bailey. Whether his room was haunted, or whether he was just terribly unlucky, I knew I had no choice. The following day, I would represent him in court, and do my utmost to break the curse that blinded him. To be continued. Time to save! Nope. There we go. Okay. February 22nd, 9:23 a.m. The Old Bailey, defendant's antechamber. The Old Bailey. This place always makes me feel strange. I seem to get chills down my spine and break out in a nervous sweat all at the same time. Well, I didn't think I'd be back here so soon.
That's my line. Good morning.
Ah, good morning, Mr. Natsume.
It was only 2 days ago that I was declared not guilty here.
Yes, we somehow managed to prove that he didn't stab Miss Green in the back.
But now this! Another morning, another murder! Here I am again in this hellhole! Can't keep coming to court!
I'm beginning to think he's right. It really does seem as though he's cursed. Mr. Naruhodo, I'm afraid I have bad news. Oh! Mr. Natsume, good morning.
Yes, morning.
So, here we are again.
Yes, again. Judicials admits me to go be Kotobak Esquires. What's the bad news?
Oh dear. You heard, didn't you?
If you come in shouting at the top of your voice, people can hear. I'll be hearing what you say.
Oh, I am sorry. You've done nothing wrong, Miss Susato. Now, what is it?
Poor guy. He's been a part of almost every crime. Yeah, it's crazy bad luck.
Well, it seems that the prosecution in today's trial will be led by Lord Beric Van Zieks. Van Zieks?
Oh no! Oh no, no!
The so-called Reaper of the Bailey, the most legendary prosecutor in the land. In the trial 2 days ago, he pursued Soseki-san and I relentlessly. Of course, by the skin of our teeth, we managed to pull through, but still. Perhaps Mr. Natsume's acquittal in the last trial wasn't the end of the matter. After all, yes, I know what you're thinking. The legend of the Reaper, that says. Nothing can save a person in the dock when Lord Van Zieks is the prosecutor.
Oh no.
And even if that person is found not guilty, the accused will meet a mysterious end, one way or another. And we've experienced it firsthand. The man we successfully defended met the most terrifying end after his acquittal, right here in the Old Bailey.
Do I have to put up with this ice cold ice pouring into my soul again? Cursed by evil spirits and now by the Reaper. Pair of petrifying perils potentially.
Well, if it's potentially, at least you appear to have hope, Mr. Natsume.
Welcome, student, Mr. Naruhodo Esquire.
Yes.
I'm innocent. You have to believe me. You more than anyone now.
Don't worry. I'll be your steadfast ally, every step of the way in this battle. I promise. And this promises to be a hard battle, I fear. Well, the trial is scheduled to begin shortly. We should move into the courtroom. Let's go. Oh yes, I forgot to say. I'm afraid he won't be able to make it. Mr. Sholmes, I mean. That's probably for the best. Oh. If he were here, I might be tempted to rely on assault. And that could be seen as weakness. If Lord Van Zieks were to notice, he'd prey on it mercilessly. At least, that's my gut feeling. Mr. Naruhodo.
You're right. Yes, you're so right. Oh, well said. Welcome to Mr. Naruhodo Esquire. Well said.
I swear on this sword at my side, and on the spirit of Kazuma that it harbors. I'll show him what a Japanese lawyer can do. I'll set you free. With honor. Oh, yes! February 22nd, 9:40 a.m. The Old Bailey courtroom. Ah, what a familiar place.
In the name of Her Majesty the Queen, I hereby declare this court to be in session. I now call upon the counsels of the prosecution and the defense to declare their willingness to proceed. The prosecution is ready.
The defense is ready, my lord.
Readiness for the trial, my learned Japanese friend, is not what the defense needs. What you need is the readiness for your inevitable defeat.
It's not just in my imagination. It's really there. Lord Van Zieks has such an animosity towards us Japanese for some reason. It was some time ago now that he first became known as the Reaper of the Bailey, I believe. These past few years, he hasn't appeared in court at all. Yet now, he's back in the courtroom. though for some reason, only when I'm defending. This Reaper, with his curious disdain for us Japanese, is a prosecutor shrouded in mystery. Still, this isn't the first time to be pondering that. I have to concentrate on Tsuzuki-san's trial.
Furthermore, I now call upon the 6 ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You have been chosen at random to represent the will of the people in this trial. Are you ready to fulfill your duty? Absolutely. This larrikin wasn't innocent before.
I must say that I feel especially ruthless on days when my hat refuses to sit right. Oh, well, I'd rather like how you were wearing your hat. I think the ruthless look is very fetching, actually. Oh, I need to be somewhere at 10 o'clock. I have a very important meeting. Let's make this quick.
I couldn't agree more. I need to take home 5 bob tonight, or the missus will go through the roof.
Oh, may the Lord show us all the light here, and lead his flock to a righteous verdict. The British jury system is so very different to our own, isn't it? It's quite extraordinary to think that the power of the judgment is in the hands of the 6 members of the public, and that the judge can only pass sentence when all jurors are in agreement about the defendant's guilt. 6 citizens of London, chosen at random, or at least, that's the idea.
Prosecution would draw attention to the fact that the accused was on trial here but 2 days ago. Accordingly, where possible, the same jurors have been asked to return for duty today. Very well, let us commence the trial. Lord Van Zeeks, your opening statement, please. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is not the intent of the prosecution to cast doubt over your past decision. However, the innocent verdict afforded to this eccentric Nipponese before has had dire consequences. Did the accused repent for his wrongdoing in that affair? Far from it. Instead, he used his freedom to perpetrate a most blood-curdling crime. Namely, that of the attempted murder of his neighbouring lodger, an innocent Englishman. To explain the circumstances of the crime, the prosecution first calls its witnesses to the stand. The detective responsible for investigating the scene, and the accused himself. Witnesses, your names and occupations, please. Yes, sir. Tobias Gregson, Detective Inspector at Scotland Yard's Homicide Division. No, Tsuzuki announcement from the Empire of Japan. My government ordered me to come here as a student to study your language and culture. Mr. Natsume. Yes, my lord, sir. I'm quite sure I'm not mistaken. That you swore an oath never to set foot in my courtroom again. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The day before, in fact, my lord. But close enough. Believe me, this is the last place I want to be. Inspector, let's hear from you first. Explain the case for the court. Right you are, sir. The incident occurred at the Garrett household, where the defendant has his lodgings. In the ground floor of the room of the victim, Mr. William Shakespeare. The defendant had already admitted to visiting the victim on the night in question. Mr. Shakespeare collapsed in his room as a result of the poisoning by strychnine. Strychnine? He was found the following morning, when the landlord suspected something wrong, broke down the door. This means, I presume, that the door to the victim's room was locked at the time of the incident. Correct, my lord. It was locked from the inside, making entry to or exit from the room impossible. Although the victim, Mr. Shakespeare, lives to tell the tale, he very nearly didn't. The man was halfway to heaven when we first found him. I was the first officer on the scene, my lord. I have a photographic print here that he took at the time to show how it looked. Yes, a chilling scene indeed. The man looks very much deceased. That's right. Everyone present believed that's exactly what it was. Very well. I shall accept this photographic print as evidence for the court.
Crime scene photograph. A photographic print of the scene taken by the police upon their arrival. The victim can be seen unconscious at the table, having been poisoned. Alright, let's take a quick look. Okay.
Now then, Mr. Natsume.
Oh, yes, yes, yes!
As the defendant, do you have anything to say at this juncture?
They're haunted. Haunted by evil spirits.
Good gracious, what's haunted?
My lodgings! There's been a whole series of strange happenings in my lodgings. The tenant before me died in mysterious circumstances. A woman was stabbed by no one on the street outside. My neighbor was poisoned. And me! What about me? I've nearly been killed countless times.
Killed, Mr. Natsume? How?
Even on that fateful night it happened. When I returned from Mr. Shamspeare's room, I lit my gas stove and climbed into bed, but before long, the stove went out, and somebody tried to kill me.
You must always extinguish all fires before retiring for the night, Mr. Natsume.
But it's so cold, my runny nose would freeze. The point is, it didn't poison my neighbor. Oh, why am I being accused of this? Why is my existence so cursed?
Thank you, witnesses. I believe I have a reasonably clear picture of events. If I could raise one more point, my lord. One more. Conclusive point. Conclusive? Go on. Fortunately, the victim, Mr. Shamspeare, has regained consciousness after his ordeal, and he has named the true culprit. The poison consumed by the victim was administered in a cup of tea that he drank on the night in question. Tea, my lord, that was brought to the victim's room by the accused. The accused? Good grief! Order! Order!
Yes, that's the crux of this whole case. If Shosuke-san is innocent, then why? Why has the victim accused him?
Well, Mr. Natsume, what have you to say to this accusation?
That evening, yes. I did take some freshly brewed tea with me when I visited Mr. Shamspeare's room, as a gift. The public water pump outside always freezes at night, so I brought bottled water especially to make it. And this is the result! Never will I touch tea again! Never! The public pump was frozen, you say? That's not information we've heard before.
That will do, thank you. Now, according to our laws, the defense must have the opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses at least once. Therefore, I call upon these witnesses now for a formal testimony. I presume the prosecution has no objection. None whatsoever, my lord. Good. Then you will give your account of the events on the night in question to the court now.
Yes, my lord. Witness testimony. The catastrophic night. It was around 9 o'clock that evening when I visited my neighbor, and I took some tea with me as a gift. We had a heated literary debate over a nice hot drink, after which I went back to my room at around 11. Grr, my tea was completely harmless. He couldn't have locked the door behind me otherwise, could he? Strychnine. Okay, I need to look this up so I can say it correctly. Oh, what's happening? Oh, my tab automatically played. Sorry. Pause. Stop playing. Why did you do that? Okay. Trychnine. Strychnine? Strychnine? Oh, strychnine. Okay. Definitely was saying that wrong. Okay, strychnine. Strychnine. Okay. Anyways. Strychnine? See, I was thinking it, like, when I first glanced at it, I was like, is there 3 syllables? But it's actually just strychnine. Just 2. Because then if there was 3 syllables, then there would be another I, but... Strychnine,
Strychnine takes some time to have an effect on the body. People don't keel over immediately after taking it. The victim would have been perfectly able to lock the door after his guest left. The argument still stands. Yes, I see. It all seems relatively straightforward.
excuse me, but that testimony does raise rather one crucial point, I think. Mr. Nachman claims his tea to have been harmless. Presumably, though. The teacups have been examined for traces of the poison, haven't they? Why didn't I think of that?
Well, as it happens, no. We haven't been able to. Did I hear you correctly, Inspector? Scotland Yard has failed to examine the suspect substance.
How could you have overlooked something so important? Isn't that the first thing you should have done?
My learned Nipponese friend is falsely incensed. The inspector said Scotland Yard was unable to examine the tea, not that it was overlooked.
Unable? Why?
It's simple enough. There was none left, not a drop. Someone must have been very thirsty indeed. With the current scientific techniques, it's not possible to test for poison under such circumstances. You'll need a drop, but that one drop does actually have to exist, funnily enough. The lack of examination notwithstanding, it appears nothing other than the tea passed the victim's lips on the night in question. I see, thank you. The matter is clear. Cast your eyes over the jury, my learned friend.
What?
You can see it in the faces, I'm sure. The recognition of the accused's guilt. Your client's fate is all but sealed. In mere moments from now, you will lose, and your compatriot will be damned for all eternity.
He's right. I can feel all 6 of the jurors looking daggers at me. But I can't let them beat me down. I won't.
Counsel for the defense, proceed with your cross-examination.
Yes, my lord. All right. Were you and your neighbor good friends then?
No, we weren't friends. Not at all. Not at all.
Never, ever. A simple no would have sufficed. Then, why did you decide to pay him a visit?
Mr. Shakespeare fancies himself as having great literary knowledge. As a fellow scholar of English literature, we find much to talk about together. Come now, no Nipponese could understand the finer points of English literature.
And on the night in question, that was a topic of conversation as well, I presume.
It was the day of my last trial, when I was acquitted. I just arrived back at my lodgings, when I ran into Mr. Shakespeare outside on the street. It was around at 6 o'clock. We exchanged 1 or 2 pleasantries, but it soon turned into a heated discussion. He was on his way out at the time, though, so I promised to visit his room that evening at 9 to continue our debate. But did I have ill intentions? No, not one, not two, not any, not at all. Never, ever.
A simple no would have sufficed, I feel.
Then tell the court what did happen when you visited the victim's room.
A literary debate about Shakespeare's works, I think you said, didn't you?
Shakespeare? Ah, a very worthy topic of conversation, I must say. Oh, yes, my lord. Romeo and Juliet. Who was stronger? It was a profoundly pleasurable parley. Romeo and Juliet. Who was stronger?
I know I'm gonna regret asking this, but how did the debate go?
Well, we both agreed that we would reach a conclusion more quickly with a reenactment, so we battled it out. In a Greco-Roman style, naturally.
What?
Mr. Shakespeare had all sorts of costumes in his room for just such a contest.
So, when you say a reenactment, you mean you were actually in costume?
He as Romeo, I as Juliet, and after a vigorous, wild tussle. I, as Juliet, came out on top. A victory I'll cherish forever. I dare not imagine the terrible scene of carnage. The fact remains that it was you who prepared the tea and took it to the victim. Correct. I boiled the water in my room and made a pot to take with me. I heard that he was too poor to have tea himself, you see. It's true. There was no sign of any tea leaves in the man's room. I wanted to do something nice. To be friendly. So why is everyone looking at me with such suspicion? My tea was harmless. Of course it was. Do you have any basis for that statement, witness?
Yes, there was not a drop of tea left in the victim's room anywhere, was there?
That's correct. Anyone would think the fellow had never had a pot of tea before. He must have licked it dry. Which is a pity, because one drop is all we would have needed to analyze it for poison.
And you say that you returned home to your room at 11 o'clock, Mr. Natsume.
Yes, definitely. By heaven and earth, I swear it. The landlord was able to verify that, as it happens. He confirmed that the defendant went back to his room at 11 that night. How was the landlord able to attest to this? He, said it was the lamps, I believe. The lamps, Inspector.
When the tenants return to their rooms and start using gas, lamps in the other parts of the house flicker. Yes, Mr. Garrett seems to pay a lot of attention to the comings and goings of his tenants.
There's only one key to Mr. Shamspeare's room. I know that for certain. He must have locked the door himself, from inside his room. The victim has confirmed that to be the case, yes. So I'm right. My tea was harmless, completely harmless. If you take the poison, you die. Everyone knows that. It's not that simple, I'm afraid. What do you mean?
Strychnine. How long does it take for symptoms to appear then?
According to the coroner I was speaking to at the yard, about 30 minutes after the poison is consumed. Then the victim suffers violent convulsions, cramping and stiffness, and then eventually dies from asphyxiation.
So there's a 30-minute interval between when the poison is ingested and the onset of symptoms. There seem to be a lot of different types of poison in the world, that's for sure. Oh dear, death by poisoning again. It's always so awful.
30 minutes is a long time. Certainly long enough for the victim to have locked the door behind the accused after he left.
You can't deny that. And it further degrades Sosuke-san's alibi.
I have the medical report from the doctor who examined the victim here, my lord. It spells it out, really. The accused is the only person who could have done it. Very well. The court will add this report to the court record as evidence.
Victim's medical report. A report issued by Scotland Yard's medical officer. It obviously mentions the poison as well as other details gleaned during the police investigation. William Shakespeare is the victim. Cause of coma. Indigestion of a small quantity of strychnine. Toxic effects present 30 minutes after indigestion. High likelihood of the substance having mixed with the tea the victim was drinking, but no sample could be obtained for testing. Investigative conclusions. The poisoning incident occurred around 1:30 a.m. on 21st of February. Assessed from the victim's pocket watch that appears to have broken when the man collapsed after the delayed onset of symptoms. No container for the poison was found at the scene. Oh yes, I see it here. Delayed onset of symptoms. Great.
The victim would have been perfectly able to lock the door after his guest left.
The argument still stands, you say?
This is what Mr. Natsume has been saying, isn't it? The pair of them drank the tea together that night, so if there was poison in it, the victim wouldn't have been able to lock the door after the accused left later on. Exactly! Me and my tea are innocent! Sweet and innocent, I tell you! I'm afraid, sir, that doesn't follow. You see, strychnine is a slow-acting poison. In other words, it takes time for the symptoms to appear. So you could have left the room up to 30 minutes after the victim drank the tea. As long as you did that, Mr. Shamspeare could have locked the door after you'd gone. But no! We drank the tea straight away. The battle over whether Romeo and Juliet was stronger, that came after the tea. Do you have any evidence to support that statement?
In my great homeland, the Empire of Japan, we have a saying.
Drink tea while it's hot.
Sure, it probably will satisfy the prosecution.
I'm afraid there's no conclusive proof to support the defendant's assertion. On the contrary, there are sufficient grounds to infer his guilt in this matter.
No. That's the extent of their testimony, is it? If I could voice a personal opinion, Mr. Naruhodo.
Of course, go ahead.
Mr. Natsume is arguing for his innocence so animatedly and so persistently, yet Inspector Gregson just brushes what he says aside. It's really quite infuriating.
I agree.
So we need to find an inconsistency in what the inspector is saying, I think. I'm afraid so. As things stand, the jurors are sure to find Mr. Natsume guilty. As I see it, what we need to focus on is the poison and the tea. Let's listen carefully to his testimony again.
Yes. Okay, so I have a guess, and my guess is that the victim's medical report, it says that the poisoning incident occurred around 1:30 a.m., which is way later than when he said he left. He went back to his room around 11. It takes some time to have an effect on the body. People don't keel over immediately after taking it. The victim would have been perfectly able to lock the door after the guest left. So I'm not sure what statement to present this information on. Maybe this one? Because, we're not contradicting, or we're not, we don't want to present this statement on what Sosuke's saying, I think is what we want to do. So it's either this statement or the other statement, I think. Let me just overlook the evidence really quickly. Okay. So let's go with this, I guess. Nice. The argument still stands, you say? I think not, Inspector. Come again. I think you'll find that you've overlooked a very significant chronological inconsistency here. A what? What are you on about? According to this report, the victim must have consumed the poison at around 1:30 in the morning. And yet, the defendant, Mr. Natsume, left the victim's room at 11. Ah! Yes, that's right. There's more than 2 hours of missing time there. In other words, if there was poison in the tea that Mr. Natsume brought to the victim's room, how could the victim have fallen ill to it 2.5 full hours after the defendant left? Whoa! They did the same thing. So funny. The defense's argument is entirely reasonable. How do you respond, Lord Van Zieks? Pray forgive the discourtesy if my mind has wandered. I was considering what cuisine would be best to complement the contents of my hallowed chalice this luncheon. How could it have happened, you ask? I do hate to shatter illusions, but my Nipponese friend appears to be chasing a phantom idea. A phantom? Is it so hard to imagine that the victim drank his tea after the accused had left? For example, at the time stated in the medical report. Yes, at around 1:30. Mr. Natsume brought the tea with him to drink together with his neighbor. And in Japan, there's a well-known saying, drink tea while it's hot. In my country, there's an even more apt saying. There is nothing more refreshing than cold tea. The point is, if there was such a long gap, there may be other ways to explain how the victim came to be poisoned. Other possibilities. What sort of possibilities, Counsel? Well, for example, the man could have had another visitor. Another visitor? That's a very bold assertion, my learned friend. From someone who has nothing to substantiate it.
Or the victim could have taken the poison of his own volition.
You suggest this may have been a suicide, Counsel? Mr. Shakespeare has categorically denied suicide. The idea can and must be discounted.
But he could be lying.
There's something wrong, Lord Van Zeeks. I was listening to the sound of the carriage pulling up outside the courtroom. Pray, forgive the discourtesy.
Carriage? What carriage?
It would seem that the key player in this case has just arrived.
Hold it. Out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Who, sir? Or you?
William Shakespeare, my lord. Alas, 'twas I, undone by these bitter events. I am the victim. What's he doing here?
The prosecution seeks to call this gentleman to the stand. With his testimony, my learned friend's futile resistance will be utterly crushed.
You're calling him as a witness?
Very well, counsel. I grant your request with interest. I'm curious to discover what the court shall hear from the victim himself.
Happy am I, Shakespeare, to regale thee with my tale of woe, my lord. What? I still have my own tale to tell, my own tale of worse woe. I can regale the court with the tale of my perfect innocence and perfect English.
That will do, Miss Anatomy. Let the court now hear from the victim.